If you wanted to build an online education business which brings in 7 figures in revenue, 7 figures in profit, and in which you only work a few days a month, then how would you do it? What would it look like? Well, in this video, I'm going to take you through my own journey to that stage and point out the various different stages of growth and the various different inflection points that allow you to get from zero, day one, all the way through to that thriving business where you don't have to work very much in it and you can devote your time to whatever you want. In case you don't know me, my name is Olly Richards. I'm the founder of StoryLearning.com. I'm also a mentor and advisor to other online education entrepreneurs. And in fact, it's these people created the inspiration for this video, because when I was going through this journey myself with story learning, I obviously was walking that path for the first time, so I didn't know what to expect. It's only once I started helping other entrepreneurs do the same thing that I noticed that everyone is going through pretty much the same stages. The journey looks different. Obviously, people are in different niches, they have different products, different whatever, different business models entirely. But the inflection points tend to be the same, the struggles tend to be the same, and the progress tends to be the same as well. And if you kind of know what's ahead of you, then it doesn't necessarily speed it up that much, because you've still got to do all the hard work and you don't know when the inflection points are coming. But what it does allow you to do is to lean into the right areas in your business, which can help you be a lot more intentional about growth. So if we imagine a business starting from zero, let's say zero in revenue here, all the way to, let's just use 1 million in revenue for round numbers, we're going to use a time frame of 10 years. Now, most people at this point are going to say, I don't want to wait 10 years to build this. I want this business now. I'm just going to remind you what Bill Gates apparently said, which was that everyone overestimates what they can do in 1 year, but massively underestimates what they can do in a decade. And that's been my experience too. There's only so much you can do in a year, especially if you're new to this. In 5 years, you can have a business that supports you very nicely, full time. If you go for 10 years, then you can have a business that really creates huge amounts of wealth and that you can actually step back from and only, be the leadership figure, not necessarily in operations every day. I would typically divide this into 3 different stages, and we've got beginner, we've got growth, and we've got scale. In the early days, this is probably what it looks like. Not much happens, and this is revenue here, and time here. Not much happens in the first year or so. This is just you proving the concept of the business, getting it off the ground, proving that this business has the right to exist in the world, that there should be something rather than nothing. And then maybe after 2 or 3 years, you've kind of passed that inflection point and you've actually got some growth happening. After 2-3 years, it's pretty normal to be able to be doing 200,000-300,000 in revenue, that kind of level. But it's probably mostly still you, maybe an assistant or two, but you're going to be doing all the marketing. You've probably built the products themselves. And if you stop working, your business stops working. It's also important to note that during these first 3 years, there is nothing but pure, unadulterated hustle. You're going to be working flat out. Now, I don't necessarily think that you have to be full-time on your business for the first couple of years of storyline. The first 2 years, in fact, I was not full-time. I had a full-time job. I was living in Egypt, earning the grand total of £800, about $1,000 a month in my job. For 2 years, evenings and weekends, I was building my business. I don't think you need to be full-time, partly because keeping your job gives you a safety net, removes the stress. But also because when you're building your business in the early stages, there's not so much of a correlation between hard work and results. It's more about the speed at which you can cycle through different ideas and different tests. And so you've got to cycle through a lot of different ideas in order to find that thing that does work. And then that's your aha moment. You can double down on it. And that's where traction comes from. So this is what the pathway looks like for the first 3 years. Then we move into this second period. Now, this could be maybe year 3 to year 6, something like that. And what we'll often see here is that there's a fairly steady growth in revenue. You don't get this big hockey stick jump. And what's often happening in the second phase here, so if you imagine we've got, let's just say years 0 to 3 and then years 3 to 6. Here is that kind of range. What's happening in this period is you've discovered what's working and you're now doubling down and doing a lot more of that thing that's working. So if you have maybe a couple of products, maybe 3 products, and you figured out what people are buying, then at that stage, you are going to be optimizing your product catalog. So that might be creating a progression of some kind so that people have more things to buy. They can go from, as I call it, the peaks along the mountain. So they can go from product 1 to product 2 to product 3. And this increases your customer lifetime value, which means you make a lot more money per lead. It could be that you are doubling down on your traffic sources. So for example, if you have used YouTube to get to this point, then in order to continue growing, you're going to need to professionalize your YouTube. So you're going to want to systematize it a lot more so that you can get more predictable results. You're also going to be adding in a lot of the basics of online marketing. So you're going to be learning about good quality sales pages. You're going to be writing good email. And then what tends to happen is all of these good practices, like having a quality, reliable traffic flow, having a well-organized collection of products, having well-written email sequences, having some promotions on the back end, having sales pages that convert, like basic good practice. You don't know any of that stuff here. That's the problem. This is the ignorance debt that everyone has to pay down for the first few years. But once you get to this point, you know about that stuff. And so these things, when combined together, good quality traffic, sensible products, good quality marketing, creates this kind of cycle which just massively compounds and makes it so that every lead that you get used to be worth like $1 a lead now becomes worth $10 a lead because you're just doing a good job of basic digital marketing. But also, in order to do this, you can no longer do this by yourself. So what happens here is that team starts to expand, because there's no way that you can work on all these different parts by yourself. So you might have someone to come in and take over your marketing, or produce your YouTube channel, or a copywriter to start building email sequences. Whatever is typically not in your zone of genius, you then bring people in to do. Now this can be quite a tricky stage financially, because see, at the beginning, because you're doing everything yourself, right, you're not making a great deal of money, but you are keeping all of it. And so it feels like you're making good money. A lot of people have a really good time of this and are quite nostalgic about this period of time. And then everything feels a lot harder in this segment, because now you have to bring in team in order to help you systematize your operation, do everything better, do more of the things that are working. But your revenue also isn't growing by that much at this point. So you may well find that you're bringing in, say, 500K in revenue, and you've got 350K in expenses, leaving you with 150K, which after tax is probably not that much better than the job that you could have kept working at before. So it's kind of a tricky stage, but as long as you keep going, then what happens is you get through it, because everything starts to compound. Your reputation online starts to compound, word of mouth. Your traffic starts to compound. The quality of the marketing, like we've already said, starts to compound. So to a certain extent, you kind of got to push through it. And then after 3 to 6 years, if you do all of this stuff well, which is a big if, then you're going to look to getting to the 7-figure mark around here. And so here we're talking about years 7 to 10. Now in the case of story learning, my business, I think we hit the 7-figure mark around here. I can't quite remember. And so, but it really doesn't matter whether it's here or whether it's here. Point is, you would typically look to break through 7 figures sometime after the 5-year mark, once you have got your team in place and all the pillars that we were talking about. All this activity here is what grows your revenue to the point where you can scale out of this cost and then break towards 7 figures. And this is where you start to get this hockey stick growth. It happens way later. So all this work that you're doing here, it feels like you're just slaving away, nothing ever happens, and then you get the breakthrough. And it's kind of hell on earth before that happens, because you're thinking to yourself, working every waking moment, when am I going to see the results of my actions, the fruits of my labor? And it feels like it's never going to come, but it does. It's just that the compounding switch gets flicked, everything starts to work. Now, what happens from years 7 to 10? What happens from the kind of $500,000 in revenue mark to the $1 million in revenue and beyond? And you say million here, you could quite easily kind of in this period go to say 1 to 3 million. There's no arbitrary cap at $1 million. If you want to get to $1 million in profit, then you have to be doing more than $1 million in revenue. That stands to reason. So really a lot can happen here, because once you get through this compounding tipping point, then there's really it's just there's no limit to what your business can do. It kind of just then depends on the internal dynamics of the business and how scalable it is. So what is it that happens that allows you to reach those high revenue levels whilst also stepping back? Because remember, up until this point, everything that's happened before, you are working a lot. Something happens here though that means you can start to step back. Now, once you start to get up towards the million in revenue range, it means one thing in particular, which is you now know exactly what works. And you have a conception of what the leanest, most efficient version of your business. Inevitably, throughout this whole time here, you have to try so many different things. You're trying different products, you're different marketing methods, you're trying different traffic sources, you're going through different team members. So much time is lost to experimentation. But if you crack this stage here, you now know exactly what works. You know where your best quality leads and customers are coming from, and you know exactly what products they will buy and what products they will go on to buy, so that you can make the maximum dollar amount with the smallest number of leads. And this creates the most efficient version of your business. But you can only know that once you've been through all of this and you get to this mark here. So there's a realignment that takes place. And often what I find with entrepreneurs that I mentor is that in these stages here, we're focused on doing more. But in these stages here, we're focusing on doing a lot less, but we're focusing on doing it better. At this stage, it's often far easier to make money by cutting costs and stripping away unnecessary expenses, doing less, so you stick with the same amount of revenue, but your profit goes up. And you can often double your profit quite easily by just rejigging the way that your business works. So what happens here is you're doing fewer things much better and a lot more often. But in order to do that, you need to have team. And so one of the things that happens at this stage is like it's a kind of glorious moment really, because not only do you know exactly what makes money in the most efficient way in your business, but you know who you need in order to do that. So what's happening now is your team is a little bit bigger. It might be somewhere between 5 to 15 people, but it's disproportionately cheap or affordable in comparison to the revenue that you are now able to make because of the efficiency in the business. And so the key at this point is to bring in people and form an organizational hierarchy, an organizational structure where all the key functions of the business are taken care of and not only maintained, but also able to grow, because you've got people, individuals, who are both fulfilling on the products themselves, but also leading growth, which means the business can be stable and it can be maintained. And it's this right here which allows you to then step back and only come in to really oversee the business while also benefiting from the many years of hard work that allows you to continue bringing in that revenue. And that is the pathway that I went through when I was growing Story Learning, and it's the very predictable pathway that I see other people going through as well. So if you recognize yourself in any of these stages, let me know in the comments below. And in this video over here, I talk about how to develop the kind of mindset that is actually necessary in order to think like this, because your mindset will determine whether or not you can do this. It's not a business problem, it's a mindset problem. So go and watch this video over here and enjoy.